Well, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Tanner O'Brien. I'm a senior partner here at ActionCOACH in Central Texas. And I'm joined this afternoon by Tim Padden, who is the CEO of Caldus Energy. Lots and lots of years of excellent, knowledge in business and energy and all sorts of things here. Very excited to be jumping into some conversation, talk about, the journey into business, talk about some best practices, some challenges, really just share a sneak peek into what it's like to build and grow a business. So Tim, thank you so much for taking the time. If we could, I'd love to just start with maybe a brief overview, just kind of your background, and then, tell us a little bit about, what is Caldus Energy?
Okay. See here, I grew up here in Central Texas and kind of went to University of Texas. I've always kind of wanted to do the entrepreneurial thing. And so I've done a lot of ventures. I've owned factories in South Africa and in Mexico. I lived in Southeast Asia for several years. I backpacked through South America for a year and a half. And so I really kind of got into the international business side of things, right? So I had an import company, did international drop shipping before anybody ever really thought about that. And about 20 years ago, came into solar, and it was kind of an accident, right? I was looking online and I found, an ad, and I had sold a company, and my wife and I had been home together for a year, and it was about time to wrap that up. So, I just kind of started working with really the first company to go national with a PPA. It was called Citizenry, and they were really on the cutting edge, solar. I mean, back then nobody knew anything about solar, and it was good and bad that they were kind of on the bleeding edge, but also they call it the bleeding edge for a reason. Like, they had a wonderful business plan and nobody would invest. Like, it was probably the biggest missed investment opportunity that we've ever had in this country. So I got in, I just kind of fell in love with it, right? And worked with them, and was VP of sales. Then we started my own solar company, and just have been working around the country, doing some consulting, running my own business, just really enjoying it. I think it's it's a job where I feel like I'm doing something important on a daily basis. And I think that that's probably the biggest driving force you can have, and getting up out of bed and working, long days every single day, so that's what I like about it.
I love that. So if we could, I want to just kind of set the stage for the viewers, for the listeners. We've got so many different kind of business owners and different business structures when we talk about different things that we'll talk about here today. So generally speaking, when you look at Caldus Energy, kind of what does the current ownership structure look like? And by this, I mean, are you the sole founder, their business partners, you have outside investors? Kind of generally speaking, what does that look like for y'all today?
So for right now, sole founder, right? I will be bringing on some business partners in the future. Kind of my idea about equity is that you need to, if you bring it in too early, you give up too much, right? So, I like to set a platform of value and proof of concept, and, really go make it happen. And, if I'm going to talk to somebody to invest, I want to be able to prove to them that if you put in one quarter, you get out two, right? So, and, we're off to a really good start. It's my main focus right now. I'm not really doing much on the residential side, but I know it's a huge opportunity. Matter of fact, I just had a team of 6 MBAs, executive MBAs from University of Texas, right? And so they just kind of finished up their projects. And so they went in, doing SWOT analysis, the whole market. And so I'm really happy with that. I got that about a week ago. And that's something that I can use as a package with our performance, right? To go raise some reasonable money.
That's fantastic. I love that. So when you look at kind of your role currently in the business, what role do you play kind of across the organization?
I don't know. So, I've been a CEO a couple different times. I enjoy market development, right? And systems, right? So I like to find new things to do, and then build the systems for the company to run with, to accomplish them in a reasonable way, right? So I'm not the big sales guy I used to be anymore. I tend to fill with that, and just, keep an eye on things, right? Create some vision and a path, and measurable steps to achieve those goals.
Excellent. I love that. So I want, let's shift a little bit into, what makes Caldus Energy so special. So, with this, I always like to kind of just address the question of, who is it that your business serves? I think you kind of alluded to this. Sounds like it's more commercial, but, in general, if I'm in the audience, how would I know that we're a good fit to reach out to you and have some conversations?
Do you have a high electric bill, right? And a flat roof, really? I mean, it's, the commercial part of solar is starting to go through the same curve that the residential did. So we're really in the education steps of it. So we push a lot of information out. to our customers or possible customers so they can understand like what the benefits are. So literally, if you have a high electric bill and a flat roof, you can put solar on your building and lock in the cost of your electricity for the next 30 years and pay less than you're currently paying. And that's actually a big deal here in Texas right now because of the big ice storm we had a few years ago. The electric prices are going through the roof. They went up 70% in the Houston area last year. Right?
Wow.
Most people don't know that. So, when we give people quotes, they're saving significant amount of money, right? I mean, if they got a big building, $2 million, $3 million over the next, 25 years in electricity, or even churches, right? Churches can save $500,000-$600,000. And that's, and I like working with churches. That's a lot of $20 bills in a basket, right? So it's a pretty easy value proposition to get across, making it easy, right? That's good.
Fantastic. So especially on the commercial side, I know I see, flyers or ads all over the place for residential. Is there a lot of competitors in the commercial space when it comes to solar?
There's not a lot of good competitors, right? So there's a big difference between residential solar installation and commercial solar installation. So you'll see the residential companies kind of, dipping their toe in the pond. And the reality is it's different kind of electricians, different kind of systems. And it's like you won't find commercial companies doing residential installs, right? And there's a reason for that. So as for people that can actually do a good job, there's competition. There's some really good players out there, right? But it's not, I would say that the residential market's just straight up crowded at this point. It's a race to the bottom.
Got it. When it comes to solar, what's one thing that you wish more people knew about for your industry overall?
I think it's been the same problem since day one. They really don't understand the value proposition, right? Like they don't know how much money they can save. I mean, like if I can get somebody to take a look at a quote, right? They're often surprised on how much money they can save, like they didn't know. And so, I'd like to encourage people to at least look at a quote. I mean, you don't have to buy, but when people say, I just want to think about it, the question is really, what are you going to think about until you see some numbers in front of you? So I think it would be better for the industry and the world if people would just give it a taste test, right? Just take a look at, what it would look for them. And I also think that people on the residential side certainly should get several different quotes. There's good players and bad players in every market. And so you should be comparative and very educated in what you're deciding on.
Fantastic. That kind of leads me to some questions around marketing, which is, it's one of those areas that's vital to every business. And often many business owners, especially if they're newer to business, kind of tend to struggle with that. So I always like to, I'm always curious on what successful businesses are doing. What's been kind of your philosophy to marketing, especially in this business? Kind of different strategies that you use. How do you get the word out about what you all do?
I really push on referrals. Right. I mean, if you can't get the referrals, you're not doing a good job. And so, I like to work with commercial customers and maybe let them come to their one of their business meetings. Right. A lot of guys are involved in industries who do a good job for somebody and they'll give you the thumbs up. It's a really different marketing game between the residential and commercial. And the residential, you see them just spamming and blasting and phone centers calling. Right. The commercial, it's a much more serious game. It's very professional. So you got to treat people well. You've got to educate them. It's not an emotional buy. It's a financial decision, right? You got to get a CEO, a COO, a CFO to decide on it, right? So it's a very different sort of game. So we're doing some LinkedIn outreach, right? I mean, that's something that we're doing right now. And one of our big focuses is using AI in a respectful manner to go pull information together. I mean, I'm not the guy to just spam everybody. Like I get spammed all day, right? I don't want that. But, if you really put, you send out a reasonable number of emails and LinkedIn connections and that's part of the business is showing people what the opportunity is. And so I keep it to a very short, like 15-minute conversation. I'm not going to harass them. I'll just talk to them and find out, if it's a good fit. And if I think it's a good fit, I'll see if they'll move ahead, but I certainly tell people like, this is not a great fit for you and I don't want to take any more of your time. So, if you're respectful of people's time and you're trying to build value for them, your business will grow successfully.
I like that. Being, in the realm where you're just having conversations with a we'll call it a higher quality or higher level of a clientele. It's not, a necessarily a commodity at this point. There's a lot of educational, that kind of stuff that goes along with it. Um, do you have any idea, kind of, I'm just out of curiosity, when you look at, number of conversations you have to actually have for someone to be interested, kind of what's that ratio look like for your business?
Well, we pre-qualify them to some degree even before we talk to them, right? So we'll look at the building. We can do, Google, you can look at the roof, you can do the street view. There's other mapping programs we use. And so we'll take a look at it. We also look at tax records to see what kind of, if they're the owner, right? You don't want to try to sell to a renter, right? It's an ownership thing. And, so we'll spend some time making sure that it's at least be a possibility of a good fit before we, spend time with them. And then, we ask just some simple questions, right? Like, how long have you owned it? How long are you going to be there? How much money are you spending? Your guys working 24-hour shifts, or you're working just during daylight hours, which makes it different when the solar is producing during the day. And so, we kind of have them leave it to us to tell them if it's going to be a good fit. And so, you got to build some trust to do that. But I think usually by the end of the conversation, they see that we're serious and we're not just throwing up against the wall to see if it will stick, right? And we'll just go from there, if it's a good fit, if we think the numbers are going to work for them.
Cool. Well, I know we've spent a bunch of time talking about the business and kind of sharing a few different best practices, things like that. But I'd love to just take a step back, dive a little bit more into your journey. Got into solar, chose to go into business for yourself. Always curious on kind of that transition of choosing, to go into business for yourself versus, simply continuing to work for somebody else. What was that decision like for you, and kind of the reasoning behind that?
I've never worked for somebody else. Like, I've always worked for myself since I was mowing lawns, right? So I was mowing lawns as a teenager, and when I went to UT, I had an advertising company, and I, booked parties and made money that way. Well, I did have a job. It was terrible. I worked at CompuAd Computers selling phones over in a cubicle when Dell was first starting for a few months, and I just realized that that's really not for me. So I've always kind of run my own show, and I enjoy that, right? I mean, if you have the responsibility level to do that, it's good. Get to be creative, get to meet people, and I wouldn't highly recommend it, but if you're down for it, I would do it. And it's a hard, it can be a hard road, right? Especially if you don't have money. Like, that was really hard doing it when you don't have money when I was younger. And I would tell people that, if you're really, really feeling it, and not just on a whim, but if you're really feeling it and you got a mission, to go for it. But, if you're going to do that, make sure you line up the right resources, which would be, if you're 25, you should get some 35, 45-year-old advisors just to help you. I've really not met any entrepreneurs who are not willing to help younger people, because, we all kind of took a beating when we were first starting, and, everybody wants to save others from that. I think you do too, right? And so, get your resources, get the right people on the bus, right? I mean, I think that's really important. And, read. I've got, I heard you talk about, you had like a Gerber quote a little bit earlier, right? When we were talking. And so, that's the number one thing I would say, that, get out there, read your books, listen to podcasts like this, align with your community, right? Is the biggest thing you can do.
I love it. So when you look at your journey, really so far, you alluded to it's not always easy. There's some ups and there's some downs that come along with this, crazy thing called entrepreneurship and owning a business. I'm curious, has there been, we'll say, like a memorable, and maybe not the most defining or anything like that, just a memorable roadblock or hurdle that you were challenged with and forced to overcome that just really stands out in your mind for your journey?
Yeah, I do. So I had a candle factory in South Africa, of all things, right? I lived in Southeast Asia, and then my in-laws moved to South Africa. We went down there and started a candle factory, made these beautiful candles. And we did about 75% of our sales right around Christmas. They're really pretty hand-painted candles. And so I had a container full of candles. They put it on the tarmac. When it's winter here, it's summer there. So it's nice and hot. And somebody forgot to turn on the AC on the container, right? So when it arrived, it was just a big slab of wax, about $400,000 worth of wax, right? And so that was, but I mean, that's where you kind of really figure out what you're made of. I called one of my friends, and he just said, "Look, there's there's no problem you can't sell your way out of. Right. And so I just picked up the phones as my number one sales guy and fixed it. It took, it took some time, but yeah, when I realized that that had happened, that was a big, come to Jesus moment for me. And that's indelibly like imprinted on my mind to, be careful and make sure when you have an insurance policy that 30 different groups don't touch your product, because nobody's going to be accountable for it.
Mm, that's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Especially when something big like that happens, we tend to go into that kind of freeze, fight or flight type of a mentality. I'm curious for you, was there one of those three that you kind of initially hit before being able to take action?
Yeah, I'll freeze, but I'll only do it for like a minute. Right. And then I'll sit down and start writing out a plan. Like there's no crying over spilled milk, especially in this business, right? Running your own business, everybody's counting on you. And so you can pout for just a minute, and then you better get to solving the problem
Beautiful.
100% of the time.
Love it. So let's fast forward. Let's look at kind of the next 3 to 5 years. I'm curious, especially as this business continues to grow, continues to gain momentum here. What does the next 3 to 5 years look like for you and your business?
I've got a goal of hitting 100 million in sales in the next 3 years. I think that's really possible. I'm building a good team. I got some really great people on board. I'm working with some significant partners. We're looking at some much larger projects around the United States. So, I would like to grow a good business, right? That everybody, one of my goals is when I hire people, I wanted my business to be a good place to be from, right? When they
Mm,
come on board and they learn how to work and they learn how to create value and be a real team member. Not everybody's going to stay here forever, but I would like people to say, oh yeah, this guy's from Caldus Energy, right? Let's hire him, right? I mean, that's kind of good and bad. I think culture is very important. So yeah, just build a substantial business, a profitable, substantial business that does good, is good, right? That I enjoy working in. I've certainly had some businesses I ran that eventually I didn't really enjoy working in, right? And that's where I really became educated on culture. And so, I'd like to kind of that family feeling, and I like everybody to win, and the customers. So if I can do that, I'll be happy, right?
I love that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask some questions around, the topic of building a team, especially in today's environment. And I always like to kind of start off a question around this, which is just leadership style in business. So I'm curious on, what's your leadership style in business, and has it or how has it changed over the years?
It's changed that I used to not really have a leadership style, right? So I think that I guess what I've learned over time is that really people are your best asset. And so I think it's important to be respectful. And, I always ask people what they want to do. I don't like to tell them what they're going to do. If people are doing something they enjoy, that they're passionate about, they do such a better job, right? They're more pleasant to work with, and, they get more done. They'll be more willing to bring ideas to the table, right? Because I mean, I believe in a kind of a flat organization, right, where everybody gets input. I think that's worked really well. I'm not a dictator, right? And if that's kind of my responsibility, right? To bring people to the table where I want to hear their opinion. Like if I brought somebody on board and I don't really care what they say, that was a bad choice on my side, right? So yeah, building that team, like the right people on the bus is the most important thing. And then, once you do that, it's not about managing people as much as co-creating with your team.
Hmm. So what is your approach to hiring and retaining these team members?
Hmm. It's changes all the time. These days I tend to hire through relationships, right? Not through Indeed or whatever. I don't use headhunters. There's enough people in the solar industry that have worked together, over the years. Like when I first started, we'd run an ad for somebody who's done solar operations or solar sales and get zero responses because it was such a new industry. We had to like grow our own, right? We had to get guys out of the Foot Locker and turn them into solar salespeople. But there's enough guys now that if I'm looking for a position, I'll use my network, right? I mean, I'm kind of connected to the business network here in Austin. I'll reach out on LinkedIn, and I'd rather work with somebody that somebody kind of will vouch for, right? I think that works
Hmm.
better for everybody. And then you can
Very
pay them more because you don't have to worry so much, right?
I like it.
Yeah.
I always love asking kind of some questions around training with team. I've heard a lot from business owners recently that it's important to continue to provide some training, some education to your team, things like that. So when you look at just like your team, the people that you've had the opportunity to work with and hire and bring on, when you look at say the next 6 months, just based on the current business climate, where your business is heading, things like that, what do you believe are the most valuable things for your team to be learning right now?
I think leadership, right? I think that you're always teaching leadership. You're always showing leadership, right? I mean, you need to be who you want them to be, right? I mean, they'll learn from me, and it comes through communication. I think the communication is really how you pass those things along. So I really encourage reading. I mean, like E-Myth, like Dysfunctions of a Team, right? There's all these books out there, right? That will help people and expand their context, right? So most people who don't manage well is because their context is not big enough. And I really do think that through conversation, through just kind of putting ideas back and forth, and through reading, bringing stuff in. I like bringing trainers in to help us all expand ourselves. I mean, I think that running a business is really about expanding yourself as a person, being more accountable, like being able to handle more. I think that that's the number one reason people should go on that entrepreneurial kind of hero's journey, shall we say, is because it really forces you, allows you to be the biggest person that you can be. And so that's why most of my friends are business owners in some fashion, right? Because it's just, we just all get along. We kind of have common understanding, and also, we have high goals. We strive to be bigger and better, everything we do. So that's important. So the team needs to kind of pick that up, and I try to choose people that have that capacity to at least start that. And then you have a very high functioning, effective team with a high level of communication.
I like that. So we've certainly covered a ton of ground here in our conversation. So I'm going to just pause for everyone that is watching. Make sure you pause this, go back, or save it. There's a ton of great nuggets that we've already kind of uncovered here today. But as we begin to wrap up, I've got kind of a few rapid fire questions, really top of head answers for each of them. I know we could go deeper on a handful of these here, but kind of best way to do top of head answers for each of these.
Okay.
So first one here, what is your key to success?
Some balance between working hard and planning, right? So I really plan things out. I used to kind of just go by the seat of my pants, but I sit down and I write it down. I get intentional about it. I set a lot of buy-win goals and how-to goals. And I think that since I started doing that religiously, it's made a big difference in my lifestyle.
Excellent. What's one piece of advice you would give to other business owners?
Read, right? Read. I think that's something that all successful business owners I've run across, they just dig in, right? They read Collins, they read Gerber, just that you have to keep just pouring it in the top of your head so you can be better at what you do.
Excellent. That brings up perfectly to this third question. What's one book that you're reading right now or have read most recently?
I am about to read The Next 100 Years by Friedman, right? So that's a little bit old, but I'm kind of curious. It's been on my bookshelf. I've got huge bookshelves, right? And then probably after that, it's going to be The Fifth Discipline, which is an organizational behavior book by Singh, right? And I've read that. It's one of those things, like, you read it every 5 years, right? If you're serious about what you're doing. And it seems boring, I think, to a lot of people, but if you're really looking to build an organization, it's mandatory, right? And of course, if you're thinking about starting a business, that's Gerber E-Myth, right? So just begin the process. Like, don't start a business until you read that, right? It'll save your credit cards.
That it will. Kind of final rapid fire question. If you could choose only one area in your business to magically improve tomorrow, where would you put that magic?
I think it's always been have everybody in the business appreciate the value of systems, right? And I'm not a huge systems nerd, right? I just realized that if everybody's going to achieve what they want to achieve, you have to do it with consistency and where everybody's on the same page, and that gets all wrapped into a good system.
Excellent. So before we get into kind of the final question, I always love to wrap up these interviews with how can others that are watching, that are listening to this today, how can they find out more about your company, learn more about you and your journey? How can they get in contact with you, anything like that? Where can we send the viewers for more information?
You can just go to Caldus, Caldus, energy.com. or shoot me an email. You can just send it to info@caldusenergy.com. It'll get to me. And if you're looking to start a business, I'd be more than happy to speak with you. I've done a lot of that. I mean, just not myself, but I've worked with a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I think that that's a good way for that I can get back to people, right? So even if you just want a good book list, shoot me an email. I got it. I'll send it to you.
Excellent. I love that. I'll make sure to put that information in the description here below. So make sure that after we wrap up here, go click on all that information. Make sure you check it all out. But Tim, as we wrap up here, final question I'd love to end these interviews on. What is most inspiring to you today?
What inspires me the most today? I think helping the world go green. Like that's always been in the background. And all you got to do is turn the TV on these days, and it's a problem. I think everybody needs to participate. I don't think it's an option anymore. I think it's a global warming, debate is over. And we're seeing the difference right now. So everybody can participate. They can save money and participate, right? Like that's not a bad combination. There's a lot of, that's what I like about the business. Like I can offer somebody a way to participate in making the world a better place and saving a whole lot of money. So in some ways, I've got an easy job.
Beautiful. Absolutely love that. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. It's been a genuine pleasure to get to know you, get to know a little bit about your journey, about your business, all of that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for sharing some best practices, some insights, and taking the time to sit down with me this afternoon.
All right, Tanner. I appreciate it also. Thank you very much.